Hey there, Christian Walsh, Coldwell Banker Wire Associates, here with a timely and important topic, can't pay the rent. So this is a guide for tenants and landlords when the resident can't pay the rent. So it's important to note, Executive Order N3720 that went into effect on March 27th in the state of California prevents residential evictions related to residents not being able to pay the rent due to COVID-19. And this applies to all residential rental properties in California, whether they have a loan or not. So that's important. So note that this applies to everybody. So rent is still owed, even if they're not able to pay for April and May, but this rent will need to be paid back in the future. So all residents bear that in mind, that you get a forbearance, but the rent must be paid back. The other thing residents must have is verifiable documentation that shows that COVID-19 has affected the income. So it's whether it's pay stubs, bank statement, letter from a supervisor, or a layoff notice, you need documentation to show. And the other thing that a resident should do and must do per the executive order is submit in writing for the rental forbearance to the landlord. So you're going to let the landlord know in writing that you're not going to be able to pay all or some of the rent. And this should be done before the rent is due or up to 7 days after the rent is due. So there's a few different options when you can't pay the rent, when you don't have the money. There's a few different options that the landlord and the resident can work out together to come up with a plan that is mutually beneficial. So a full forbearance would be a case where the resident can't pay any of the rent. So the landlord will go ahead and waive the rent for that month, but that rent still must be paid back. The other way to go is a partial forbearance. So this would be the resident can pay a portion and the landlord is going to defer the payment of another portion of it. Again, it will be paid back in the future. We highly recommend that if the landlord has a sizable security deposit, the landlord can use those funds to cover some or all of the rent for the month. And there's nothing that says in the future the landlord can't ask for those funds to be replenished for the security deposit. But this is a mutually beneficial way. So use some of the security deposit funds so that it helps cover the rent. When it comes time to pay the rent back, and this is negotiated between the resident and the landlord, when the repayment will start. And what we recommend is that those payments are split monthly. You don't want to have a huge bill come due. So if you miss April and May, June 1st, if you owe 3 months, that's not going to help anybody. So come up with a plan that allows a resident to pay it back over time. So for example, the Irvine Company, one of the largest property managers in Orange County, is essentially allowing all residents to pay half the rent and they can forbear the other half if they can demonstrate a loss of income, and they will then pay that other half back in the future over several months. So this will work out for both sides. So my biggest piece of advice on this, when you come to an agreement, document the agreement in writing. We want signatures from the landlord or the property manager and the resident, because nobody's going to remember in 3 months, 6 months. If you try to remember it, nobody's going to remember exactly the arrangement. So we want this documented, and then this would be an addendum essentially that goes to the lease. Or the rental agreement. We're actually working on a form, and you can reach out to us for that. That'll help cover this and make it easy to document the arrangement. So another thing to remember, the courts are closed. So you can't move forward with an eviction anyway. So let's just go ahead and take advantage of this time to work together, be compassionate, don't judge on either side. Landlords don't judge your residents and vice versa. Residents try not to judge the landlords. This is a time for compassion. What I will say, this is also a time where people are going to remember those who worked with them to make life easier, and they're going to remember the ones who didn't work with them. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're all working together. Again, Christian Walsh, Coldwell Banker, Wire Associates. My number is 949-677-3466. Whether you're a resident, landlord, property manager, or you just own a home, give us a ring and let's chat through this. Thanks so much.